In this video, I'll be showing you how you can leverage attribute traits in the asset framework to better define your data, helping you and your users visualize data more easily. I'll also show you how to add limit traits to your attributes. But first, what is an attribute trait? As we know, an element is a logical grouping of data, commonly a piece of equipment, like a wind turbine. And attributes represent individual pieces of data belonging to the element, like the turbine's wind speed and rotor speed. An attribute trait is a very common piece of data. An example of an attribute trait is a high limit. Our turbine's wind speed has a high limit of 110, and its rotor speed has a high limit of 25. So as you can see, high limits are quite common. The asset framework now includes an attribute trait that can be used to define high limits. Other attribute traits included in the current release include other limit conditions and forecasted values. Additionally, we will continue to add more attribute traits in future releases. For instance, location traits, such as longitude and latitude, are being added in the next release. As you can see here, an attribute trait might be found directly under an element or as a child attribute. So what's the point of using attribute traits? As we mentioned, these traits are common and are commonly used for the same purpose. Therefore, some attribute traits will automatically change the way visualization tools behave. For example, the maximum and minimum traits are used as the maximum and minimum values of the gauge symbol in PI Coresight. Attribute traits are also easy for users to find and use in our visualization tools. Let's see this in action. I'm going to demonstrate how to set limit traits. Here I have an AF database for a wind farm with 50 wind turbine elements. And I also have a dashboard in PI Coresight that I use to monitor my wind turbines. You see that in the dashboard, I have a wind speed gauge. But this gauge doesn't really make much sense right now, since the wind speed rarely reaches 1,000 miles per hour. So I'm going to create limit traits for the wind speed attribute in my AF database to improve this dashboard. So I'm going to go back to PI System Explorer. And since these wind turbines are based on a template, I'll make my change at the template level by navigating to Library, and then under Element Templates to my wind turbine template. I'm going to scroll down and find my wind speed attribute, which is here. To set a limit trait, you simply need to right-click on the attribute and select Limits. This is also where you would go to set forecast values. There are 7 limit traits available. To create a new limit trait, we simply check the box in the leftmost column. And to change the value, we'll double-click on the value column and enter the value that we want. So I could change this if I wanted, for example, to 10 miles per hour, but I'm just going to leave it at 0. So what we've just created is a static limit trait. But as you can see, we actually have a data reference column as well. This means attributes can actually reference a lot of different data types, including formulas, PI points, table lookups, essentially any data type that you would use to define a normal attribute. So let's see how this works. We're going to set our maximum trait, and this time we'll click on the data reference, and in the drop-down list we'll select PI point. This is the option you should use if you want to reference a PI point or another attribute as your trait. To configure the data reference, we'll click on Settings, and then we'll click on the ellipses here. You'll notice that this is the same PI point data reference dialog that you would get if you're setting a PI point data reference for a normal attribute. So here we can either choose a PI point or another one of our attributes. In our case, we have an attribute that captures the highest recorded wind speed for the turbine. So that's the value I want as my maximum. So I'll select the attribute, and in the drop-down list, select highest recorded wind speed, and click OK. So now let's set our high limit. And since our high limit depends on the model of the wind turbine, we'll use a table lookup as the data reference this time, since the information can be found in a table. So we'll click on Data Reference and select Table Lookup. click on Settings and the ellipses, and we get the Table Lookup Data Reference dialog, again the same one we would get for a normal attribute. If you need any help with this step, please refer to our other video on this topic. So I'm going to select my table, which is the model specification table, the results column, which is my wind speed high limit, and I'll put my condition. So the model should be the value of my model attribute. And I'll go ahead and click OK. When we're done setting our limit traits, we can go ahead and click OK. Now we see that next to our wind speed attribute, we have a little plus sign. And if we expand it, we'll see that we have 3 child attributes for the 3 limits that we just set. But as you'll remember, we're in our element template. So let's go see what this looks like at the element level. So if we scroll down to the wind speed and we expand it, we can see that we get values for each one of our attributes. And if we navigate to a different turbine, we can see that we have different values according to our data reference. In order to save our changes, we'll go ahead and click the check-in button at the top here. Now let's go see how our limit traits have affected our dashboard. Note that it could take a few minutes for your changes to take effect in PI Coresight. Now that we've set the minimum and maximum for the wind speed attribute, we can see that the range of our gauge has changed, and now the maximum value in the gauge is the maximum limit trait. And since the maximum is coming from an attribute, this gauge will automatically be adjusted as the maximum recorded wind speed changes. And it's also unique for each turbine. Let me show you yet another enhancement to my dashboard. Let's say I want to make this circle into a multi-state symbol that flashes red if the wind speed is higher than the high limit that we just set. To do this, I'll right-click on the circle and select Configure Multi-State, and I'll drag and drop the wind speed into the multi-state attribute section. And we can see that automatically the multi-state symbol is configured using the limit traits that we set in the asset framework. So I'm going to change this one to red and blinking, and this one to green, and very quickly I've been able to configure a multi-state symbol. Additionally, as you'll remember, the high limit is actually coming from a table and is different for the different turbines. Before, you had to put a specific value to define the states of the multi-state symbol, but now, since the limits are used, these can be different for the different turbines. So let's go check a different turbine. And we see that our multi-state symbol is indeed working correctly. As you can see, attribute traits offer a great opportunity to enhance your existing dashboards and to improve your user's experience.